Hello, friends. It's the Stefa again. Before we drift off into tonight's mystery, make sure you're warm, comfortable, and at peace. Maybe you've had a long day, or maybe your night is just beginning. Either way, I'm here to help you unwind. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's get cozy, together. Now, let me tell you about the house I should have never moved into. It was a grey two-story on Finch Lane, wedged between two newer developments that looked like they belonged in another city entirely. The realtor said it was a charming fixer-upper, and to be fair, she wasn't wrong. The wood siding had been recently painted, the porch light worked, and the rent was laughably low for the neighborhood. I didn't ask why. After the breakup, I wasn't in the mood to question a good deal. I just signed the lease and moved in. The warning came later. I was carrying a bookshelf inside when the old woman from across the street called out to me. "You got Unit 13, didn't you?" I nodded, catching my breath. She pursed her lips. Poor Marcus. Never did come back for his things. I must have looked confused, because she shuffled closer and whispered, "He was the last tenant. Moved out in a hurry, middle of the night. Said something was walking through the house." I laughed politely and went back to unpacking. But that night, lying in bed, her words stuck with me. Nothing happened that first week. The place was drafty, sure, one of the radiators hissed constantly, and the upstairs light flickered when the wind blew hard. But that was old house stuff. Harmless. The second week was different. It started with a sound. Footsteps. Upstairs. At first I thought maybe a squirrel had gotten into the attic. But no, this was rhythmic. Heavy. Like boots on hardwood. Thud. Pause. Thud. Pause. Always around 1:47 a.m. I live alone. No pets. No upstairs neighbors. And when I got out of bed and crept upstairs, flashlight in hand, nothing. Empty guest room. Bathroom untouched. Study just as I'd left it. But the moment I lay back down, the footsteps started again, this time closer. I tried telling myself it was the pipes or the house settling. That's what everyone says, right? By the fifth night, I was sleeping with the hallway light on. I stopped drinking coffee after 2 p.m. just to keep my nerves steady. On a particularly sleepless night, I emailed the landlord. She replied the next morning. "That house has been inspected twice this year. We found no structural issues. It's over a century old. Old homes make noise." But noise didn't explain the other thing. The whispering. It began faintly, like someone talking into a pillow coming from the vents, or maybe the walls. I recorded it on my phone, played it back dozens of times. Sometimes it sounded like my name. Sometimes just gibberish. But one night, the whispers formed a sentence I could clearly understand. "Go back. It's still down there." That same night, the power flickered out. All the lights in the house blinked off at once. I lit candles, trying not to panic. As I moved through the hallway, the air turned noticeably cold, like stepping into a refrigerator. And then, the basement door creaked open by itself. I hadn't even known it was unlocked. The realtor told me it was sealed, something about safety concerns, an unstable staircase. I stood there staring at the darkness yawning below, candle in one hand, heart hammering. I didn't go down that night. But the next day, I bought new locks. Still, the footsteps continued. So did the whispers. By the third week, I was behind on work. I nearly fell asleep on a Zoom call. My boss offered me a leave of absence, but I needed answers more than I needed rest. So I started digging. Public records. Local newspaper archives. Message boards about haunted homes. That's when I found an article dated 1954. A boy named Henry Blythe, just 10 years old, had vanished from that very house. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just, gone. The family moved out a month later and refused to speak to reporters. Another piece in a puzzle that kept getting darker. So I reached out to Marcus, the former tenant. Found him through an old forwarding address on a utilities bill. To my surprise, he agreed to meet me. We sat at a diner just outside town. You hear the boots, too? He asked, sipping black coffee with shaking hands. Yes, I said. Always upstairs. He nodded grimly. You ever go down into the basement? No. It's locked. He looked up sharply. Don't believe that. There's a passage under the rug in the laundry room. Trap door. I think it was part of the original foundation. A tunnel maybe. Tunnel to what? To wherever it went. He scribbled something on a napkin and slid it across the table. Go at dawn. That's when it's safest. The pages crackled as I turned them, each one stained with time and something darker. The ink had bled in places, but the writing was clear enough to read. Personal notes of H.G. Blake, it said on the inside cover. At first, the entries were dry notes on construction costs, tenant complaints, and weather reports. But then, a shift. Mentions of unusual sounds at dusk. Of voices calling his name from within the walls. One page, dated just weeks before his death, simply read, "It watches me now, even in daylight." The last entry was scrawled, frantic. The handwriting barely legible. October 31, 1916. It's inside. I thought I was inviting my son's spirit. But I brought something else. I can hear it. It's in the stairwell. It's not a door to the dead, it's a tunnel. And it goes both ways. Dear God, it's almost it. The rest of the page was torn. The ink ended mid-sentence, a black slash across yellow paper. That night, I didn't fall asleep. I just sort of drifted, staring at the ceiling with every light on. I must have nodded off, because I woke to the sound of footsteps again. But this time, they started earlier. 1:04 a.m. sharp. And they were different. Faster. Intentional. They no longer stayed in the hallway. They entered the spare room. I heard the floorboards creak, then something softer like fingernails dragging across the wood. I held my breath, listening. Then nothing. The digital clock changed. 1:59 a.m. And then creak. The top stair. Another creak halfway down. 3 more steps. Then silence. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. My skin had gone icy. Each breath came out in mist. And then came the worst part. The mattress dipped. As if something had sat beside me. I felt its breath against my cheek. Wet. Hot. I bolted. No coat. No keys. I didn't care. Just the pounding of my feet on the pavement as I tore into the night, heart about to explode. They found me half an hour later outside a closed gas station, barefoot, shaking, unable to say anything, but it was on the bed. The hospital kept me for 2 nights. Acute anxiety episode, they called it. Delirium from lack of sleep. No signs of a break-in. No footprints in the dust. I never went back to 713 Bexley. Didn't even collect my belongings. Left behind everything, photos, dishes, my grandmother's piano. I live with my cousin now in New Jersey. A high-rise. Concrete. Built in 2011. No basements. But some nights, when the lights go out, I still hear those footsteps. Slow. Pacing. Waiting. The house is listed again. Same price. $200 a month. The listing says charming and historic. But the door is still open. And the footsteps are still walking. The journal was old pages, brittle, curling at the edges like burnt leaves. Ink bled into parchment, but the words were still readable. Logbook of Edgar Whitley, it said on the front. Most entries dealt with shipping manifests, trade routes, repairs to his old estate. But by autumn of 1916, the tone had shifted. He began writing about shadows under doors that didn't match the light in the room. About voices humming lullabies through keyholes. About mirrors that showed other rooms not in his house. His final entry was dated October 31st. It's not outside anymore. It's in the walls. The markings worked, but not the way I thought. I opened something. Not a passage. A mouth. The sentence trailed off. A jagged tear in the page, as if his hand had slipped or been pulled away. That night, the noises started earlier, 1:04 a.m. I was staying there for the weekend, part of a historical preservation project. The floor above me creaked in long, lurching steps, like someone pacing. But there was no one else in the house. The wind had died hours earlier, and every window was locked from the inside. Then the pacing stopped directly above my bed. The ceiling groaned. I held my breath, the kind of stillness that makes your ribs ache. A faint scratching followed, deliberate, like nails tracing the edge of a floorboard. Then silence. The digital clock beside me blinked 1:59. A creak at the top of the stairs. Another step. Then two more. By the time it reached the last step, the air had gone bitterly cold. I exhaled and watched my breath bloom in the dark. Then it entered my room. Heavy, dragging steps. The floor dipped beside me. Not a creak, a compression, like someone sat down on the bed. I didn't look. I couldn't. The breath on my face was hot and wet, like something breathing through cracked lips. I ran. No phone. No coat. No shoes. I hit the front door at a full sprint, feet slapping the pavement as I bolted into the night. 3 blocks later, a 24-hour pharmacy called the police. They found me curled up near the ice machine, repeating nonsense. My chart at the hospital said acute dissociative state. They wanted to keep me longer. I refused. I never returned to that house. I left behind all my clothes, my laptop, even the family photos I had brought along. I didn't care. The foundation in charge said they'd mail me what they could. I told them to burn it. I'm in a sublet now, middle of the city. The lights stay on all night, and the neighbors are loud, which is exactly what I want. But sometimes, when I wake at 1:59 a.m., I hear floorboards shifting above me. And I remember the Whitley house. And what I think I saw. I shouldn't have stayed late that night. But I did. Everyone always says, if you hear a noise, don't go check. But no one ever listens. Curiosity's the sharpest hook. It was October 17th, Tuesday. The Riverside Archive Building. I remember the date because I was finalizing an incident audit for my manager, Lewis. I'd been there since 9 a.m. fueled on vending machine coffee and stale pretzels. The cleaning crew was long gone. The old pipes clanged as they cooled for the night. At exactly 11:38 p.m., the first bang echoed through the corridor. I jumped, nearly spilling my mug. The sound came from the east wing, near the record vault. A storage area sealed off most of the time. Heavy wooden door. Manual lock. No one had any business being in there after hours. Another bang. Louder. Like fists on steel. I grabbed the office key ring, the large brass vault key jangling at the end. I figured maybe the maintenance team had left something running. Or worse, a burst pipe. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The emergency lights had kicked in, painting the walls in sickly red. The air grew still, not quiet, but held, like everything was waiting. Then the banging stopped. I stood in front of the door, key in hand, heart racing. Silence. Hello? I called. No answer. I turned the lock. The bolt gave with a loud clunk. The door creaked inward on rusted hinges. Inside, pitch black. The switch by the entrance flicked the overhead fluorescents to life with a buzz. The lights stuttered. The room was empty. No people. Just rows of filing shelves and forgotten cabinets. Boxes half collapsed under decades of weight. Furniture under tarps like bodies covered with sheets. But it was cold. Unnaturally cold. The kind of cold that prickles your gums and fogs your eyes. Frost laced the floor like spider webs. The air reeked of mildew and copper. And underneath it, something older. Something buried. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun. Yanked the handle. Jammed the key into the lock, but it wouldn't fit. The key had just opened it seconds ago, but now it was as if the lock had grown a new mouth, swallowing the keyhole whole. The lights dimmed. Then the rustling began. Soft at first. Then louder. Like something unfolding. The tarps started to shift. One at the far end fluttered as if a gust of wind had passed beneath it, but there were no vents. No windows. No airflow. The frost thickened. My breath came in choking clouds. Then the cabinets began to rattle. One drawer. Then two. Then all of them. Slamming open and shut, their contents leaping out like the room itself was trying to vomit. I stumbled back. The lights flickered again, strobe bursts of horror. In one flicker, I saw it. At the far end. A figure. Too tall. Limbs impossibly long. Shoulders brushing the ceiling. In the next flicker, it had moved closer. In the next, closer still. It didn't walk. It shifted. Wrong. Boneless. Smooth skin stretched across its head where eyes and mouth should be. I couldn't breathe. My heart was screaming in my chest. Flash 10 feet. Flash 5. Its fingers unfurled. Thin, jointed like twigs. Reaching for my throat. The lights died. In the dark, something touched my face. Cold. Soft. A whisper brushed my ear, brittle and dry. Why did you come? I screamed. Threw myself at the door. It burst open. I sprawled out into the hallway, the warm air of the corridor rushing into my lungs like life itself. I ran. Didn't even bother to shut the door. I resigned the next day. Louis thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. But I saw the security feed. Or what was left of it. The cameras had gone to static at 11:37 p.m. and didn't recover until 12:16. No footage. Just snow. I still work in archives. New job. Different company. Modern building. But sometimes, when the heating pops late at night, I hear something that sounds like drawers slamming shut. And I leave. Every time. Because I now understand. Some rooms aren't forgotten, they're sealed. And some doors aren't meant to be opened. Sarah was already ahead of us, her flashlight darting from corner to corner as she sifted through old paperwork and dusty office supplies. Check this out, she called out, holding up a water-stained file folder. It contained a list of names, scribbled notes in the margins. One name caught my eye: Lydia Wolfe. The handwriting was hurried, desperate, as if someone had written it in a panic. Call it, it said, before it's too late. Who's Lydia Wolfe? I asked. No idea, Sarah muttered, flipping through the rest of the folder. We continued down the hall, the atmosphere growing heavier with each step. The air felt thick, as if the building was holding its breath. I could barely hear my own footsteps over the buzzing in my ears. It was the kind of place where every creak, every shift of the floorboards made you wonder if something was watching, waiting. At the end of the corridor was another office, this one with a large window that looked out over the main production floor. I stepped closer to get a better look, and that's when I noticed something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. There was a figure in the window. A shadow, barely visible against the grime. It wasn't much, just a silhouette, but enough to make me freeze. "Did you guys see that?" I whispered, my voice barely a breath. Sarah glanced up from her papers. "See what?" There was nothing now. The window was empty, but the chill in the room intensified. "Forget it," I muttered, shaking it off. "Let's just get out of here." But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. On the desk near the window was a small, leather-bound journal. It was open, and there written in neat, slanted handwriting was a name. Lydia Wolf. The same name from the file. I picked up the journal, hesitant, but curiosity won out. Flipping through the pages, the entries started out mundane, business as usual. But the further I read, the stranger the entries became. She described unsettling events, things moving on their own, whispers coming through the walls. She wrote about a presence that had begun to stalk the halls of the factory. The last entry was dated September 27, 2008, the day before the plant closed down. "It knows I'm here. It's been watching, waiting. I hear it in the vents, in the walls, in the dark. It's getting closer, and I can feel it crawling under my skin. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for me. Don't come here. There is no escape." The words sent a chill straight down my spine. I slammed the journal shut and looked around the office one last time. That's when I heard it. A low, grinding sound. It came from below, somewhere beneath the floorboards. The entire building seemed to groan with it. And then I saw it. A shadow, darker than the room around it, creeping across the floor. It moved against the light, its shape unnatural, shifting, changing, as though it was made of smoke and oil. And it was getting closer. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to Sarah and Mike, but they were frozen, staring at something I couldn't see. The figure in the corner had shifted again, now standing directly in front of us. The shadow stretched, towering taller than a man, its limbs long and unnaturally thin. It reached out with fingers that seemed to stretch and curl, gnarled and wrung, dragging across the floor with a sickening scraping sound. Before I could move, a voice, low, guttural, and impossibly close, whispered in my ear. "You shouldn't have come." I didn't need to hear anything else. Panic flooded my chest as I turned and ran. Mike and Sarah were already ahead of me, but I could hear them stumbling behind, their footsteps heavy with fear. The factory's hallways stretched on endlessly, twisting and turning, as though the building itself was alive, shifting around us. My headlamp flickered, casting erratic beams of light against the walls. The shadows were everywhere now, crawling along the edges, watching, waiting. We didn't stop running until we reached the broken window we had entered through. But as I climbed out, my heart dropped. The fence we'd come through was gone. The gate was sealed shut, as though it had never been opened. The parking lot was a void, nothing but empty space in all directions. I whipped around, scanning the area, but there was no sign of the others. No sound. Then, through the eerie silence, I heard it. A soft click, like a door opening, followed by slow, heavy footsteps approaching from the darkness. I didn't wait to see who or what it was. I ran. We all ran, but only I made it out. The others. I haven't heard from them since that night. I've called, I've tried reaching out, but the phone rings and rings with no answer. It's as if they were swallowed by the factory itself, lost to whatever was lurking there. I should have known better than to go exploring. But now, when I close my eyes, I hear those footsteps behind me. And I know I'm not the only one who made it out. Bear-proof containers and zipped up the tent. We crawled into our sleeping bags and tried to get comfortable, but neither of us could shake that uneasy feeling. The forest was too quiet now, and the night air felt thick, oppressive. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to be an animal. I lay still, straining my ears, trying to figure out if it was just the wind or someone walking near our camp. Mark stirred next to me, and I could hear him muttering under his breath. I slowly unzipped the flap of the tent just a crack, enough to peek outside. The forest was still. The moonlight filtered through the trees in eerie patches, casting long shadows. I couldn't see anything. No movement, no figures lurking in the woods. But I knew something was out there, something that didn't belong. Mark woke up fully now, and I could tell he felt it too. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, but didn't say anything. The footsteps had stopped, and for a moment, everything seemed calm again. Still, the sense of being watched never left. We tried to sleep, but the oppressive feeling lingered. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had us both on edge. Just as I started to drift off, I heard it again. The footsteps. Only this time, they were closer, coming from the edge of the camp. My heart started to race. I reached over and shook Mark awake. "We need to leave," I whispered urgently. His eyes shot open, and he looked around. "What do you mean leave? It's the middle of the night." "We're not alone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't argue. We gathered our things quickly, trying to make as little noise as possible. But as we moved, I felt the unmistakable sensation of eyes on us, cold and unblinking. We hurriedly packed up, our hands shaking as we tried to make sense of the night. We knew we were being watched, but we couldn't see by what or who. As we broke down camp, the sound of footsteps returned, this time from all around us, circling us like a predator preparing to strike. The air grew thick, and we could almost taste the fear hanging in the atmosphere. Mark grabbed his pack, and we started to move toward the trail, keeping our heads low and our footsteps light. It wasn't until we reached the trailhead that we looked back. The camp was empty now, silent as it should be, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It felt like we were being followed, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. We made it to the truck without incident, both of us practically running at that point. The entire way back to Seattle, we kept our eyes peeled, expecting something to appear in the rearview mirror. I haven't been able to shake the feeling since. Every so often, I think I hear footsteps behind me, or catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. Maybe it was just the stress of being out there, but part of me knows it wasn't. That place, Blackwood Trail, wasn't like any other wilderness I've ever been to. Something there, something unseen, doesn't want anyone to stay. Something that moves when you're not looking, that waits for you to turn your back. We never went back, and I don't plan on it. Some places are meant to stay forgotten. Some things should never be disturbed. Sharp object, but no weapon was ever found, and there were no other signs of human activity. The only thing that remained were the strange footprints larger than either Mark's or mine and the overwhelming sense that we were being watched, stalked by something that shouldn't have been there. Mark and I both try to brush it off, but every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the voices, still see the tall, thin shadows moving unnaturally in the trees. Something about that place, something about those woods, is wrong. I don't know if it was a prank, a supernatural occurrence, or something else entirely, but I do know one thing for sure, there's something out there in Blackwood Trail, and it's not something I'm ever willing to face again. The worst part is that sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear those voices, those strange, muffled arguments, carried on the breeze. And no matter how hard I try to shake it off, a part of me knows that what we encountered that night wasn't just our imagination. Some doors are better left unopened, and some stories better left untold. But I can't forget. And I'm not sure I ever will. There's something in this place, something dark and twisted, that's been waiting. I can't ignore it anymore. The dreams are becoming harder to wake from, the tearing sound echoing in my mind when I open my eyes. And it's not just the fear, it's the pull, the curiosity, the need to understand what happened, what's happening now? Something is trying to communicate with me, but it's not human. The way it moves, the way it contorts, it was always there. I just hadn't seen it yet. Maybe it's been there for years, feeding off the darkness that clings to this place. Maybe the hospital itself is the source. This building has seen so much suffering, so much death. And some things don't leave, not really. Maybe Michael Keane wasn't the only one who died that night in the fire. Maybe something else took his place, something worse. Something that should never have been allowed to live. The thought of going into the old wing terrifies me. The maintenance tunnel is hidden, out of sight, a forgotten passage between the living and the dead. But if I want answers, if I want to understand this thing, I have no choice. I've tried ignoring it, pretending that it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But it's not. I know what I saw, I know what's out there. And if I don't act soon, I fear I'll lose my grip on reality altogether. I've been watching the clock tick closer to 3 a.m., feeling the cold creeping up the walls as the temperature drops in the east corridor. I know that when I leave the security office tonight, it will be waiting for me. That thing. And I'm not sure what it wants, but I suspect it's been waiting for me, just like I've been waiting for it. I wish I could turn back. I wish I could leave this place behind. But now, it's part of me. It's inside my head, scratching at the walls of my mind, whispering in that strange, wet voice that I've heard in my dreams. The thing has found me, and it will not stop until I find it too. In a way, I hope that when I find it, it will finally answer the question that's been haunting me since that first night: what the hell is it, and what does it want with me? But deep down, I think I already know the answer. Some things don't need to be understood. Some things are meant to remain in the dark. But I've crossed that line now. I'm already too far in. And tonight, I'll face it. You're right. It's not the end. The thing I saw felt wasn't going to just let me go. It never does. I drove away that night, my hands gripping the wheel too tight, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. The road stretched out before me like an endless void, and every shadow seemed to hide something just out of sight, waiting. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized whatever that thing was, it hadn't been contained in that house. It had followed me. It was watching me now. The days that followed were a blur. I went home, tried to sleep, tried to push it all out of my head. But the whispers kept coming. Not in the attic or the garage this time, but in my apartment, on the street, in the quiet moments between waking and dreaming. I thought I could ignore it. I thought it was just in my head. But when I woke up one night to find the kitchen light on flickering, I knew it was here. I knew it was still coming for me. I grabbed the knife again, the same one I had used in Mike's house, though now it felt different. It felt like a futile attempt at protection, a reminder of my fear, my helplessness. And then, standing there in the dark kitchen, I heard it soft at first, like someone dragging their fingers along the wall. But the sound grew louder, more deliberate. I could feel the air shift, the temperature drop, the weight of its presence. It was here. The thing I'd been running from had found me. And I had no more hiding places left. I dropped the knife. I was done running. I just stood there, listening to the sound, knowing it was going to be the last thing I ever heard. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. A heavy silence filled the room. The kitchen light buzzed once, then went out. And then, footsteps. Not from the kitchen, not from behind me, but from somewhere far below. The ground rumbled softly, like something large moving beneath it, the footsteps thumping in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I didn't know what it was, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't human. I took a step back toward the door, then another. And I ran. I ran as fast as I could, down the hallway, out the door, into the streets, and I didn't stop. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun it. I had become part of its game. And it wasn't done with me yet. Listening to the echo of the piano notes, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, or a dream, or even the house settling. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen that piano. I knew it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. I sat there in the dark, my eyes wide, listening, waiting for more. The 3 notes rang out again, sharp and haunting. They echoed through the walls, sinking into the very foundation of the house. The air felt heavier, as though something was pressing in from all sides. I couldn't sit still any longer. I grabbed my phone and texted a few friends, asking if they'd ever heard of something like this happening. No replies. Everyone was asleep. Or maybe they just didn't want to deal with it. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It's an old house, I muttered under my breath. It's just settling. There's nothing to be afraid of. But that didn't stop my feet from carrying me down the stairs. The basement was cold. So cold it seemed to bite at my skin as I descended. The old wooden steps creaked beneath my weight, echoing off the walls as I reached the bottom. And there it was, in the dim light from the small bulb hanging from the ceiling, the piano. Its dark silhouette seemed to loom over me, even though it was tucked away in a corner. I stared at it for a moment, my mind racing with questions. Who had left it behind? Why had the previous owner left in such a hurry? Was it possible that whatever had been haunting this house had something to do with that piano? Then, just as I was about to turn and go back upstairs, the piano keys moved. One by one, they pressed down by themselves, as though invisible fingers were playing a slow, haunting melody. The sound was nothing like the sharp, clear notes I'd heard earlier. It was something darker, something more sinister, a song that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to look away. Suddenly, the air shifted again, and I felt it, the presence, standing just behind me, watching. I turned, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. Just silence. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow, creeping across the floor. The same way the piano had played by itself, the shadow moved without a body. It slithered toward the stairs, as if it had some purpose, some destination. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. My legs felt frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. I took one step forward, then another. And just as quickly, the shadow disappeared into the darkness behind the stairs. The piano stopped playing. I rushed upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from my friend. "You okay?" it asked. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the rest of the night staring at the door, listening to the silence that now felt more oppressive than before. The next day, I called a local paranormal investigator. I couldn't stand the thought of being alone in that house any longer, especially after hearing that piano. The investigator agreed to meet me, bringing along his equipment. When he arrived, I led him down to the basement. I watched him set up cameras and motion detectors, trying to catch something on film, anything that would explain the strange happenings. When he turned to me, he looked pale. "This house," he said slowly, "has a history. The previous owner wasn't just an ordinary person. They were part of a family who practiced something dark. I didn't want to tell you this over the phone, but we've had reports of similar occurrences in this area." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "What kind of occurrences?" "Disappearances," he said quietly. "People who lived here, and then didn't. People who heard the piano." I didn't need to hear any more. I grabbed my keys. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice shaking. He stopped me before I could head for the door. "You can't just leave. It's not safe. Whatever is here, whatever is tied to this house, it won't let you go that easily." I didn't wait for him to finish. I ran out of the house, not stopping until I was in my car and speeding away down the road, heart pounding in my chest. I haven't gone back. I can't. And every time I close my eyes, I hear it, the three notes. Sharp. Clear. Unforgiving. I've started looking into the history of this house, asking neighbors, checking the records, but I haven't found anything that explains it. And every time I try to get some sleep, I wonder, is it still playing that haunting melody in the basement? Is it waiting for me to return? And what happens when it stops waiting? I don't know, but I know one thing for sure, whatever this is, it's not done with me yet. I've spent days now lost in this strange connection with the piano. The moment my fingers touch the keys, I feel something deeper than just sound. It's as if the music isn't just something I play, it's something that flows through me, reaching back into memories that don't belong to me. But as much as I want to resist, I can't stop. There's an undeniable pull. Every night, the music grows clearer, more intricate, more alive. I've started to realize that each piece it plays is a piece of Mr. Harrison's life, a life spent with the piano, creating melodies that were buried in the dust, waiting to resurface. And as I play, more and more of the house changes. It's subtle at first. The furniture seems less worn, the walls smoother. Even the light in the house feels different, warmer, almost as though it's responding to the music. I haven't told anyone about the piano's nightly concerts. How could I? No one would believe me, not the way I barely believe it myself. But I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this secret. I'm not sure I even want to. The music is becoming a part of me, reshaping me. I think about the other times I'd heard the music, the nights when the piano played itself. I wonder if, over time, I'll lose control and the music will take over completely. It's a strange feeling, knowing something is guiding you, pulling you in a direction you can't control. But there's a comfort in it, too. A feeling of connection to Mr. Harrison, to something bigger than myself, something far beyond the everyday. But as the days go by, there's an unease growing within me. The music that's filled the house is changing. It's no longer just Mr. Harrison's compositions. I feel something new, something darker, slipping into the melodies. The chords feel heavier, the rhythms unsettling. There are notes now that linger in the air long after the song is over, like they're waiting for something. Or someone. Last night, the piano didn't play at 3:17. It didn't play at all. I waited, sitting in the same spot I'd sat for the last month, but there was only silence. At first, I thought maybe it was a glitch, maybe the music had simply run its course. But as the minutes passed, the silence became oppressive. It felt wrong, as though something was missing, or worse, something was waiting. I found myself staring at the piano, watching the shadows flicker across the room, listening to the deep stillness pressing in on me. Then, for the first time, I felt it, a presence in the room. Not a physical form, but a weight, a pressure in the air. It was as though the very house itself was watching me, waiting for me to play. And then, without thinking, my hands moved. It wasn't me. It couldn't have been me. My fingers danced across the keys, playing a melody I'd never heard before, but somehow knew instinctively. The sound that poured out of the piano was nothing like the music Mr. Harrison had played. It was darker, more melancholic. The air grew colder as the melody filled the room, every note sending a shiver through my spine. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was no longer playing the piano, it was playing me. The music seemed to swirl around me, filling every inch of the room, pressing in on me, suffocating me. I tried to pull my hands away, but they wouldn't listen. The keys seemed to move beneath my fingertips, urging me to continue, to keep playing, to complete whatever it was that had begun. And so I did. 7 minutes later, when the final note rang out, the silence was deafening. It wasn't the usual quiet that followed a piece. This was different, deep, heavy. I slowly removed my hands from the keys, and as I looked down at them, I saw something strange. They were no longer my hands. They were Mr. Harrison's hands, thin, aged, and covered in faint lines, the hands of a man who had lived a long life, playing music every day, pouring his soul into the piano. I stumbled back from the bench, but the room wouldn't let me go. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the darkness deepened. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, as if something was just behind me, watching. The air grew thick with tension, like it was charged with something I couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, the piano lid slammed shut on its own, breaking the spell. The room returned to its normal stillness, but the air felt heavier than ever. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. And then I heard it soft, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was a voice, but not one I could understand. It was distant, muffled, like it was coming from deep beneath the floorboards. I turned, eyes wide, searching the room for any sign of what was happening, but there was nothing. Only the quiet of the basement, only the dim light of my flashlight casting long shadows across the floor. My mind raced. What had just happened? Who had been guiding my hands? Was it Mr. Harrison? Was he still here, somewhere in the house, trapped in the music? I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, but eventually, I forced myself to move. I left the basement without looking back, heart pounding in my chest. I ran up the stairs, through the house, and out into the night air. The streets were silent, the world outside just as still as it had been when I first moved in. But I knew things weren't the same. The house wasn't the same. The music had changed, and I had changed with it. I went back to the piano tonight. I didn't plan to, but something inside me urged me to. It was as if the piano was calling to me, asking me to return, to play. But I couldn't let it take control again. I couldn't let myself become a puppet to whatever force had inhabited that instrument. I closed the basement door, locking it behind me. The house was silent. But as I lay in bed, I know it won't be quiet for long. Tomorrow night, I'll have to face whatever it is that lives within that piano. Whatever it is that's been waiting for me. And I don't know if I'm ready. For 20 minutes after the sound stopped, I told myself it was just the house settling or maybe a mouse walking across the keys, but mice don't play 3 distinct notes in sequence. When I finally got up the nerve to check, my bare feet silent on the wooden stairs, the basement was exactly as I'd left it. The piano sat against the far wall, its wooden surface reflecting the weak light from my flashlight. I pressed one of the keys. It made a dull no musical tone at all. I didn't sleep well that night, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Moving to a new house alone does things to your mind. I spent the next day unpacking boxes in my home office, trying to make the place feel more like mine. I barely thought about the piano until 3:17 a.m. the next night. This time, it was 5 notes forming the beginning of what sounded like a melody. I sat up immediately, fully awake, sweat already forming on my forehead despite the cool autumn air coming through my window. The sound was crisp and clear, not the work of a broken piano. I grabbed my phone and started recording before heading downstairs. My hands shook as I opened the basement door. The music stopped the instant my foot touched the first step. When I reached the bottom, everything was exactly the same as before. The piano looked dead and silent, covered in dust, without a single fingerprint on its surface. I played the recording back. Nothing. Just the sound of my breathing and footsteps. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. Every night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the piano would play sometimes just a few notes, sometimes entire fragments of melodies I didn't recognize. Classical pieces, maybe, but nothing I could identify. Each time I went to investigate, the music would stop before I reached the basement. Each time, the piano showed no signs of being touched. I started sleeping less. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My coworkers on Zoom calls asked if I was feeling okay. I told them I was still adjusting to the new house. In a way, that was true. I tried setting up a camera in the basement. The footage showed nothing, just a dark empty room with a dusty piano. But every night, I heard the music. Every night, it got a little longer, a little more complex. After the third week, I called the realtor. I needed to know more about the previous owner. "Let me check the records," she said. I could hear her typing. "Oh yes, Mr. Harrison. Elderly gentleman. Lived there for 40 years. Died in his sleep about 6 months ago. His kid sold the house as is. Didn't want to deal with clearing everything out." "Why do you ask? Did he play piano?" "You know, I'm not sure. The family didn't mention it, but they did say he was very insistent about leaving the piano in the basement. It was in his will, apparently. Odd request, now that I think about it." That night, I waited in my bed for 3:17 a.m. The music started right on schedule, but this time it was different, not just a few notes or a short melody. It was a full piece, played with the skill of someone who had spent decades mastering the instrument. The sound filled the house, rising through the floorboards and vibrating in my chest. I didn't move. I lay there rigid, listening to every note. The piece lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it ended, the silence felt heavier than ever. My phone showed 3:24 a.m. when I finally got up. Each step down to the basement felt like moving through thick syrup. The air got colder as I descended. When I reached the bottom step, I noticed something different. The piano's lid was open. I approached slowly, flashlight beam steady on the dusty keys. No fingerprints. No disturbance in the dust. But as I leaned in closer, I saw something that made my stomach drop. One of the strings, thick with rust just yesterday, now gleamed like new in my flashlight beam. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching the house's history. County records showed nothing unusual. Mr. Harrison had bought the place in 1980, lived there quietly, and died in his sleep this past spring. No criminal records, no strange incidents, just a normal elderly man in a normal suburban house. I found his obituary online. The photo showed a thin man with kind eyes and white hair, wearing a cardigan and sitting in what looked like a living room, not my living room, but somewhere else. The article mentioned he was survived by 2 children and 5 grandchildren. It said nothing about music, but at the bottom, there was a line that made me freeze. "In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations be made to the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, where Mr. Harrison served as principal pianist for 30 years. That night, I set up my phone to record again. I sat in the basement, back against the cold concrete wall, waiting. The dust on the piano keys looked undisturbed in the beam of my flashlight. 3:16 a.m. My hands were sweating despite the basement's chill. 3:17 a.m. The first note made me jump, even though I was expecting it. The sound didn't come from where I was looking. It seemed to come from inside the piano itself, as if the strings were vibrating without the hammers touching them. More notes followed, building into a complex piece I didn't recognize. I watched the keys move by themselves, each one dipping slightly and rising again as the music played. No dust disturbed. No visible mechanism at work. Just music flowing out of a dead piano. The piece lasted exactly 7 minutes again. When it ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to my own breathing. Finally, I played back the recording on my phone. Nothing. Just basement silence and the occasional creak of the house above. I started sleeping in the basement after that. I brought down a camping sea, a sleeping bag, and a small lamp. Every night, at 3:17 a.m., the music would play. Every night, it was the same piece, white, complex, and beautiful, something I couldn't identify. Every morning, I'd wake up to find another piano string, cleaned of rust, gleaming like new in my flashlight beam. After a week of sleeping in the basement, I noticed the keys were starting to whiten. the old yellowed ivory slowly returning to its original color. The wood of the piano began to shine in places, as if someone were carefully restoring it, inch by inch. I tried playing the piano during the day. The keys still made dull thicking sounds. No music at all. But each night, it produced perfect, crystal clear tones. I found Mr. Harrison's son's phone number through some online searching. When he answered, I could hear children playing in the background. "Yes, that was Dad's piano," he said when I asked. "He played it every single day for as long as I can remember. Even after he retired from the symphony, he'd practice for hours." Mom used to joke that he loved that piano more than her. "Do you know why he wanted it in the basement?" There was a pause. "He got sick near the end, arthritis in his hands. He couldn't play anymore. It broke his heart. He had the piano moved to the basement because he couldn't bear to see it every day, knowing he'd never play it again. But he wouldn't sell it. Said it still had music in it." I didn't tell him about the nightly concerts. Instead, I asked, what time did he usually practice? "Early morning, before anyone else was awake," he said. "That's when the music was clearest. Mom said he'd get up at 3 something most days." "Crazy old man," he laughed softly. "Why do you ask?" I thanked him and hung up. That night, I did something different. At 3:16 a.m., I sat down at the piano bench. The wood felt cold through my pajama pants. I placed my hands on the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under my fingertips. Some of the keys were still yellowed, but others had returned to a pristine white. 3:17 a.m. The music started, but this time I could feel it through my hands. Each key moved under my fingers, guiding them. I wasn't playing. Something else was moving my hands, pressing each key with precision and skill I didn't possess. The music flowed through me, using me as a conduit. 7 minutes later, when the piece ended, my hands were shaking. I looked down at the keys. Where my fingers had touched, the ivory was completely restored, white and perfect. 3 more strings gleamed like new in the darkness inside the piano. The next night, I sat at the bench again. The same thing happened. My hands moved with the music, and more of the piano restored itself. Night after night, the process continued. Each time, I felt less like I was being guided and more like I was learning, remembering something I'd never known. After a month, the piano was completely restored. Every key gleamed white in my flashlight beam. Every string shone like new. The wood glowed with a rich, deep polish. During the day, I found I could play simple tunes, nothing like the complex pieces that filled the night, but actual music instead of dull thuds. Last night, I sat at the bench at 3:16 a.m., as usual. But when 3:17 came, there was only silence. I waited, hands on the keys, but no ghostly force moved my fingers. Instead, I felt an urge, a memory that wasn't mine. And I began to play. The piece flowed out of me, as if I'd known it all my life. My fingers moved across the keys with confidence and skill, drawing forth the same complex melody I'd heard every night for the past month. 7 minutes later, when the final note faded, I sat in the darkness, listening to the silence. I understood then what Mr. Harrison meant about the piano still having music in it. He'd poured 40 years of his life into those keys, those strings. All those early mornings, all that passion and dedication, it couldn't just disappear. This morning, I looked up piano teachers in the area. Darkness is still there, waiting. No matter where I go, it's always just one step behind. And every night, I lie there at 3 a.m., not daring to fall back asleep, because in my mind, I hear it again, the scraping, the dragging, the sound of claws against the walls. I tell myself it's just the memories. Just my mind playing tricks on me after everything that happened. But the truth is, no matter how many new places I try to make home, I can't escape it. Something is still walking up there, somewhere. Somewhere in that building, in the crawl space, beneath the weight of time and decay. And I can't shake the thought that someday, somehow, it will find me again. Every time I hear something move in the walls of my new apartment, I hold my breath and force myself to stay still, telling myself, it's just the house settling. It's just the old pipes. But in my heart, I know it's more than that. I know that thing in Philadelphia is still waiting for me. Waiting for the next tenant who needs a cheap place to live. I know because I still check the building's rental listings every few months. The rent's still cheap. And I wonder, will they be next? Will they last longer than I did? And then, I wonder how long will it take before someone else goes in, starts hearing the footsteps, the scraping, before it finds its next victim? It never truly lets go. I never truly let go. I'll keep looking over my shoulder, even if I move 100 times. The truth is, some places, some things they don't let you leave. I hold my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. My eyes dart to the darkened hallway where the steps seem to echo louder with every passing second. Something is coming up the stairs. No one should be in this house. I glance at my phone again, fingers trembling as I swipe open the camera feed. The figure is gone from the porch, but now it's standing in the doorway. Its long, pale hand is just reaching toward the handle of the door, and I see the same horrible smile stretched across its face. I try to speak, to move, to wake Sarah, but my throat tightens as though a heavy weight is pressing down on it. Every muscle in my body is frozen, paralyzed by the fear that grips me. The footsteps get closer. I can hear them now, not just on the stairs, but right outside our bedroom door. The sound is deliberate, slow, methodical. The figure, whatever it is, has come inside. My body goes cold, and I swear I hear a whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from the hall. It's a voice, low and almost familiar, but twisted. Open the door, it murmurs, so softly I can barely hear it. I'm waiting. I can't think. I can't move. All I can do is stare at the door, my eyes wide, searching for any sign that Sarah is waking up, that this is just a bad dream. But she's still asleep, breathing deeply, unaware. The footsteps stop right outside the door. I hold my breath, praying that whoever or whatever it is will go away, but instead, I hear it. A knock. Soft at first. A tap. 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 Then louder. Bang, bang, bang. The sound shakes me, reverberates through the walls. I don't know how long I sit there, staring at the door, paralyzed with fear. My phone buzzes again, and I quickly check it, my fingers trembling. There's a new notification, motion detected at the front door. I open the app one more time. The figure is standing in the hallway, right outside our bedroom door now. Its smile is wider, too wide for any human, stretching to impossible lengths. The camera's infrared feed catches its pale skin, glowing faintly under the light. Its eyes are black, hollow. Empty. It raises its hand again. Open the door, the whisper comes again, and this time, I feel it deep in my chest, as though it's calling to something buried inside me. Something primal. I fight every instinct in my body, every urge to move, to run, to scream. Don't open the door. I glance at the door handle. It's slowly turning. It's opening. The footsteps, so slow and deliberate, creep into the room. Closer. Closer. I hear the breathing. It's not Sarah. It's not human. The door creaks open all the way. A shadow stretches across the room, dark and looming. A figure looms just inside, filling the doorway with its unnerving presence. Its eyes, those hollow pits of blackness, are fixed on me. And that smile. That awful, terrible smile, stretches even wider, showing teeth too sharp, too long. It's not in my yard anymore. It's in my house. In my room. It steps forward, one slow, heavy step at a time, the air around it thick and cold. I can't move. I can't scream. My body refuses to obey. It stops just inches away from me. Its face is now so close, its smile so wide, I can feel its breath, cold and sharp. Do you want to play? It whispers. I know this isn't real. I know I should wake up, but the words have already been spoken. The door is open. And now, there's nowhere to hide. It moves closer still, reaching toward me with its long, pale hand. Suddenly, my phone buzzes again. It's a new notification, but I don't want to look. I don't want to see it. But something compels me. I glance down at the screen. Motion detected in the hallway. It's still standing there. Waiting. And now, there's another notification, motion detected in the living room. I turn slowly, dread creeping through me like a poison. And in the doorway to the living room, standing motionless, is another figure. Couldn't wait any longer. I had to know what was in that letter. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I took the final envelope from the chimney's secret compartment. The paper felt cold against my skin, more recent, less fragile than the others, but the weight of it, the finality it promised, made my hands shake harder. My phone buzzed again. Claire, seriously James, call me. The message felt distant, irrelevant in this moment. The envelope in my hand felt as if it had been waiting for me, almost as if it had known I'd be here, in this house, at this very moment. I tore the envelope open. Inside, a single, crisp sheet of paper lay folded neatly. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the words quickly. James, the letter began. By now, you've read everything you need to know about your past. But you haven't seen the full picture yet. The house on Maple Street isn't just a place where you live now. It's a place where time folds on itself. The letter you're holding was written by someone who knows what happens next. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart skipped a beat as I read the rest. In the next few minutes, you will hear footsteps coming up the stairs. They won't stop until they reach you. Do not open the door. Do not look away from this letter. The person coming isn't who you think they are. You've already met them. But they aren't here to finish what they started. My breath caught in my throat. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing in the doorway. But nothing. Just the dust motes dancing in the weak sunlight, as still and quiet as they had been when I first entered the attic. When they reach you, you will know what to do. The only thing you have to decide is whether or not you're ready to leave this house. There's no going back after this. Time doesn't work like it used to. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. What did that mean? Who was coming? Suddenly, the footsteps in the hallway outside the attic door started again. Slow. Steady. Almost deliberate. I could hear them clearly now, just outside the door. They weren't the faint, distant sounds of a house settling. These were real footsteps, heavy, unmistakable. I clutched the letter tighter, feeling the ink on the paper bleed through the thin sheet. My phone buzzed again, another text from Claire. James, I swear to God, if you don't pick up, I'll come over there. Please call me. The footsteps were closer now. I could hear them moving down the hall toward the attic stairs. The letter I held in my hand suddenly felt like it was burning, scorching my skin. But I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop reading. The last sentence chilled me to the core. If you open the door, you'll never leave. The door to the attic creaked. A cold draft rushed through the room, swirling the dust, and for a moment, everything felt wrong. The air became thick, heavier than before. I could hear the faintest whisper from the hallway, so quiet I wasn't sure it was real. But it sounded like my name. James. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to focus. Stay calm, stay still, I told myself. I couldn't move. I couldn't make a sound. But the footsteps were almost at the attic door now. And with each step, something deep inside me was starting to know what was coming. I had to choose. What was waiting behind that door wasn't just something from my past, it was something tied to the very fabric of this house, to everything that had happened here, and to everything that would happen. Slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as I swerved to the side of the road, my heart racing. The figure didn't move, just stood there, as if waiting for me. I couldn't make out any features in the darkness, only a silhouette against the faint glow of my headlights. I sat frozen, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, unsure of what to do. The car's engine idled as I stared at the figure, and then something strange happened. The air around me felt heavier, thicker, as if the world had slowed down. Time seemed to stretch. The figure didn't seem to notice the car. It remained motionless in the middle of the road, its posture unnervingly still. After what felt like an eternity, I finally forced myself to look away. I backed up slowly, trying to make out any movement, but the figure didn't react. I put the car in reverse and slowly started to drive away. My eyes kept darting to the rear-view mirror, half expecting the figure to suddenly appear in the reflection, but the road remained empty. It wasn't until I turned the corner and the station was no longer in sight that I allowed myself to exhale. I tried to shake off the lingering feeling of dread, but it wouldn't go away. My mind kept flashing back to the man I had encountered at the gas station. The way he didn't seem to care about my lie. The eerie flatness in his voice. The way he stood still, almost unnaturally calm, as if he were waiting for something to happen. I had to stop. I pulled over to the side of the road, heart pounding, and reached for my phone. I texted Claire, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I just needed to talk to someone. But the text didn't feel like enough. I needed to hear a voice, to be reassured. I needed to know I wasn't alone. As I sat there in the car, the silence almost suffocating, I heard a sound. A faint tapping against the window. It was a sound I had heard before, many years ago. The tap 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 of fingers against glass. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. The same figure was standing right outside the window. The face was closer now, and in the dim light of the street lamp, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a man at all. The features were wrong in a way that made my blood run cold. The eyes were too wide, the skin too smooth, almost waxen. It didn't blink. It just stared at me through the glass. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The figure raised a hand, pressing it against the window. The tapping sound stopped, and then the figure simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark of the night. I didn't drive any further. I couldn't. I was frozen in place, staring at the spot where the figure had vanished. The same feeling of déjà vu swept over me. I had seen this before, in a way, long ago, when I first found those letters. The mystery of them, the impossible knowledge, the sense that someone knew exactly what I would do and when I would do it was still unresolved. But now, more than ever, I was beginning to suspect that the letters were only the beginning. There was something much larger at play. Something that had been following me for years, waiting for me to uncover the truth. I looked at my phone again. Claire hadn't responded. I should have called her when I had the chance. But now, I wasn't so sure if I should. I didn't know who or what I had encountered on that road, and I wasn't sure I was ready to explain it to anyone else. What if it was all connected? What if I was being watched? Or worse, what if the answer had always been right in front of me? The road behind me, the letters, the figure, it all seemed tied together. My mind raced with questions that I couldn't answer. One thing was certain though, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. High beside it. I grabbed the burger, taking a huge bite. It was surprisingly tasty, the flavor rich and satisfying, but the silence in the diner felt more oppressive now. I glanced around again, feeling like I was being watched. The usual clatter and chatter you'd expect in a diner, even at night, was absent. I couldn't even hear the hum of a refrigerator or the sizzle of something cooking. Helen was standing behind the counter, her eyes fixed on me. I couldn't remember her ever leaving the kitchen, but she was there, standing so still that it almost felt like she was waiting for something. Her tired eyes didn't blink, and her gaze felt unnervingly focused. I tried to ignore it, forcing myself to focus on the meal in front of me. I didn't even realize I was eating so quickly until my plate was empty, and I noticed I hadn't taken a single sip of my coffee since my first one. The silence dragged on. I checked the clock on the wall. 3:54 a.m. A good hour and a half before the next leg of my drive. I wiped my mouth with a napkin, then looked up to thank Helen, but she wasn't there. The kitchen door stood ajar, but there was no sound coming from it. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the heavy silence. "Helen?" No answer. Just the same thick, stagnant air pressing in on me. I stood up, feeling the cold sweat start to bead on my neck. Something was wrong here. I didn't know why or how, but it was the same feeling I'd had when I'd been stuck in that gas station parking lot months ago. The same sense of unease creeping up my spine. I walked toward the kitchen, half expecting to see Helen behind the counter or cleaning up. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see her apron hanging on a hook, but there was no sign of her. Just an empty, quiet kitchen. I froze. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I turned back to look at the dining area, where my now empty plate and mug sat untouched, as if I'd never even eaten. And that's when I saw it. A small piece of paper, folded neatly on the corner of the table where my meal had been. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't noticed it there before, and I was sure it hadn't been there when I first sat down. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. "Don't trust Helen. She never leaves the kitchen." The words hit me like a cold wave, a chill that ran from my spine to the tips of my fingers. I looked back toward the kitchen. No movement. Just the quiet emptiness. The bell above the door jingled softly, and I swiveled in time to see a car pull up outside, headlights cutting through the darkness. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my things, rushed to the door, and as I passed the counter, I glanced back. Helen was standing there again, her hands folded in front of her, watching me with those same, unblinking eyes. The smile on her face had returned, but this time, it didn't seem quite as friendly. I pushed the door open, my heart racing, and stumbled into the night. The gravel crunched beneath my feet as I hurried toward my car, my mind spinning, the words on the paper echoing in my head. I threw open the car door and jumped inside, slamming it shut behind me. As I started the engine, I glanced toward the diner one last time, and in the window, I saw Helen standing perfectly still, her hands now pressed flat against the glass, watching me drive away. I didn't look back as I sped down the highway, my pulse thundering in my ears. I drove for miles, the eerie image of Helen's face pressing in on me from the corners of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something that wasn't quite human. But one thing was for certain, I wasn't stopping at any more roadside diners. Not at night. Not for anything. And I would never, ever forget the look on Helen's face as she stood in that window. The watch had stopped again, frozen at 2 a.m. I tried winding it again, thinking maybe the movement was just faulty. But this time, I noticed something odd. As I adjusted the crown, the hands seemed to resist, as if something were pressing back against my efforts. I shrugged it off as maybe a defect in the gears and went to bed, but a strange unease settled in my chest. The next night, it happened again. 2 a.m. on the dot, the hands froze. But this time, when I touched the watch, something felt wrong. The air around me grew colder, and the familiar tick-tick-tick of the watch seemed to reverberate in my head, louder than it should have been. I quickly checked the time on my phone. It was 2:15 a.m. I hadn't been asleep long enough to dream, but I felt the weight of sleepiness pressing down on me, as though time itself was stretching unnaturally. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to keep the watch on my wrist, thinking maybe I could ignore it. But that night, the ticking didn't stop. The minute hand, which had previously been stuck, began to move again, but at an odd, uneven pace. It seemed to tick faster than normal, skipping some seconds entirely, while slowing down on others. My head spun. The sensation of time bending felt more real than anything I had ever experienced before. I decided to take the watch back to Sal's antique shop, hoping maybe they could fix whatever malfunction it was. When I entered the store, I noticed that the room felt different, darker, as though the rain outside had thickened the air inside. Sal, an older man with a wrinkled face, looked up from behind the counter, his expression neutral. As I approached, I noticed the shelves seemed slightly emptier than before, but I couldn't remember what had been missing. "I see you've had some trouble with that watch," Sal said as I handed it to him. "How did you?" I began, but he interrupted me. "Some watches aren't meant to be worn," he said quietly, setting it down on the counter. "Some of them keep time differently than we expect." "Is it broken?" I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. "No," he replied, staring at the watch, "but it doesn't run like you think." "You didn't notice, did you? The inscription. 'Time reveals all,'" I muttered, recalling the engraving. "What does it mean?" Sal's eyes grew dark, and he looked at the watch in a way that made me uneasy. "This isn't a watch." "Not exactly. It shows you moments, not just the time. That inscription, it's a warning." I took a step back, unsure of how to respond. What did he mean? A warning for what? Sal seemed to hesitate, almost as though he was reluctant to say more. "The watch has a history. It's not just about the hours. It shows you time, yes, but it's not the time you know. It can reveal what happened in the past, or what could happen in the future, but it's never accurate. Not always." I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to think that this watch had anything to do with whatever strange occurrences I'd been experiencing. But then, I looked down at it again. I hadn't noticed before, but the hands were moving erratically, faster than they should have been, spinning and flipping through the hours like they were trying to outrun something. I asked Sal to explain more, but he only muttered something about leaving the watch behind. I couldn't understand him, but I couldn't leave it behind either. Something about it had a hold on me, and I wasn't ready to let go. Before I could say anything else, Sal waved me away. "You have to go now," he said urgently. "Don't bring it back again. If you keep it, it will show you things you aren't ready to see." As I left the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The night had grown unnervingly quiet. Even the usual sounds of the street felt distant. I glanced at the watch one last time before slipping it into my pocket, feeling an unsettling weight in my chest. Time, I realized, wasn't something I could escape. But something tells me this is only the beginning, that the watch has more to reveal, things I may not want to know. And candles set in a circle around my bed. I had read enough to know that whatever was attached to the watch might not be easily dismissed. The night felt different as I went through my ritual, a quiet dread settling deep in my chest. I was more prepared now, or so I thought. The watch sat on the bedside table, its hands steady at 10:30 p.m., waiting for the time to strike. As the minutes ticked by, I kept my eyes on it, my pulse steady but anxiety rising. The room felt heavy, like a storm was approaching, but outside the weather was clear. I could hear the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the low whirring of the ceiling fan above me. Everything felt normal. But I knew it wouldn't last. 1:55 a.m. The ticking began to slow, the sound growing louder with every passing second. My heart matched the rhythm, pounding in my chest as I watched the second hand crawl toward the ominous moment. 2 a.m. The watch stopped. Time froze. The air shifted, thickened, and for a moment, I thought I could hear something like whispers at the edge of hearing, soft and unintelligible. I gripped the bat in my hands, knuckles white, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The house was utterly still. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. The same deliberate steps that had echoed through my house the night before. Only this time, they were accompanied by a soft dragging sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. The sound grew louder, faster, more frantic. Something was coming down the stairs, and it wasn't just the footsteps. I quickly checked the phone, no signal. The light from the candle flickered, the flame fighting against the unnatural cold that had descended over the room. The door creaked. I could feel the floorboards groan under the weight of something unseen. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to face the door. The handle was twisting slowly, deliberately. The door opened. I swung the bat wildly, hitting nothing but air. The darkness outside the door seemed to stretch, like it was consuming the hallway, growing darker and deeper with every passing second. My throat tightened, and I barely managed to breathe as the shadow crept inside, not quite a figure, but something darker, heavier than the space around it. It was getting closer. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The shadow was upon me now, its coldness unbearable, pressing in on my chest like an invisible weight. It was suffocating. I swung again, harder this time. The bat passed through the shadow, but it recoiled in an almost human way, like it was hurt, or perhaps just annoyed. The temperature in the room dropped even further, and I could feel my breath fogging in the air. The shadow backed into the hallway, and I swung one more time, shouting out, "Leave me alone!" For a moment, there was nothing. No footsteps, no dragging sound. Just silence. Then came the voice, barely a whisper, but cutting through the silence with terrifying clarity. "Not yet." And just like that, the shadow was gone. The temperature in the room returned to normal, the oppressive weight lifted, and the ticking of the watch resumed, steady and clear. 2:30 a.m. I couldn't move for a long time. My body felt frozen, but my mind was racing. I had survived. But I didn't know for how long. What was that thing? Why was it coming after me? The watch, it had something to do with it, that much was clear. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no easy way out. I kept the watch, despite the terror. Maybe it wasn't the watch itself, it was just a marker, a way for whatever had followed me to communicate, to make its presence known. And as long as the watch was in my possession, I was tied to whatever it was. I tried to destroy the watch. I tried to bury it. But it always came back to me. Sometimes I'd find it in my drawer. Other times, it would be on my kitchen counter, waiting for me. Each time, the inscription "Time reveals all" stared up at me, reminding me that I wasn't done yet. I don't know what the watch wants, or what it's truly tied to, but I can feel it. I can hear it ticking, whether it's in my pocket or resting on my bedside table. And sometimes, when the room grows quiet, when I'm lying in bed at night, I swear I can hear the faintest whisper from the darkness. Not yet. Just silence. It wasn't the usual static or dead silence you'd expect from a disconnected phone. It was different. A kind of stillness that felt thick, pressing against my eardrums. I almost put the receiver back, but before I could, I heard a voice, low and gravelly, like someone speaking from far away, as if their words were filtered through a tunnel or the other side of a thick wall. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking, more out of instinct than rational thought. The voice on the other end seemed to hesitate for a moment before responding. "I've been waiting for you." I froze, feeling the hair on the back of my neck rise. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Who would be calling from this dead phone, and why had it been ringing now, after so long? "I'm sorry," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end chuckled. It wasn't a laugh, exactly more like a low, rumbling sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "It doesn't matter who I am. Not yet. But you're already too far in to turn back now." The words sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't hang up. Something about the tone, the way it resonated deep inside me, kept me rooted to the spot. It felt like it was pulling me deeper into something. Something I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, barely audible, my grip tightening on the receiver. "What do you want?" The voice was quieter this time, almost a whisper, but I still heard every word clearly, as though it was right next to me. "The house has always been waiting for you. It's been calling to you." I felt a chill creep down my back. The wind howled louder outside, rattling the windows once more. The phone line hummed with an unnatural buzz, a faint static that seemed to vibrate in the air. "Who's calling me?" I demanded, the words coming out more forcefully than I'd intended. The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, I heard a faint shuffle, like the receiver was being moved on the other end. I held my breath, feeling the tension building. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the voice said, "You'll understand soon. The door is open. I'll be waiting." And with that, the line went dead. I stood there, staring at the receiver in my hand, my mind racing. What had just happened? Who had been on the other end of that call? I had no answers, only more questions and a growing unease that gnawed at the pit of my stomach. The ringing had started again, this time softer, like the echo of something fading into the distance. I hung up the phone, almost slamming the receiver back into place. The basement felt colder now, and I felt a presence, though there was no one there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I quickly left the basement, shutting the door behind me, but as I climbed the stairs, I couldn't shake the thought of what the voice had said, "The house has always been waiting for you." The next few nights were restless. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, lurking in the corners of my home. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the anxiety continued to gnaw at me. The wind outside seemed to blow harder, the floorboards creaked in ways that didn't make sense, and sometimes, I thought I heard faint whispers coming from the walls. But then one night, about a week after that call, I was working late again, my eyes glued to the computer screen, trying to finish some code when I heard it. A faint sound, like a soft knock on my office door. I froze. No one else was home. The house was completely still. Another knock. Louder this time. I hesitated before walking to the door. My hand reached for the handle, but I didn't open it right away. Instead, I stood there, listening, trying to make sense of the sound. Was someone playing a prank on me? It was late, and I was tired, so my mind must have been playing tricks, right? I opened the door slowly, heart in my throat. The hallway was empty. But the moment I stepped out into the hall, I saw it. The same ancient rotary phone from the basement, sitting on the floor in front of me. I stared at it for a long time, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. There was no way it could be here. I had left it in the basement. There was no reason it should be here now. It began to ring. I wanted to run. I wanted to flee the house, to get away from whatever was happening. But instead, I found myself moving toward the phone, my hand trembling as I reached down to pick it up. As I held the receiver to my ear, I heard the same voice from before. "Welcome home," it said, the words reverberating in my mind like they had come from the very walls of the house. "It's time to see what you've been searching for." The line went dead. I dropped the receiver and backed away, staring at the phone. The house seemed to groan around me, the walls shifting as though the very structure was alive, breathing, waiting. I knew then that I wasn't just living in this house. I was becoming part of it. And whatever was waiting in the spaces between the walls, between the seconds, between the ringing of the phone, was calling me home. And now I couldn't escape. Clean the dust off the shelf to see if anything else was out of place. But it was the same as before, old, forgotten, untouched. The phone sat there, innocent and still, almost mocking us with its silence. Mike suggested we look for any hidden compartments or strange mechanisms inside the shelf, maybe some kind of secret passage or trick. But after an hour of poking around with no luck, he looked at me with an expression of concern. You know, this is starting to sound like one of those creepy stories you read about on Reddit. Maybe you should think about just getting rid of this thing. I've thought about it, I said, running my hand through my hair. But what if it's important? What if whatever's on the other end is trying to tell me something? Mike raised an eyebrow. What? Like a warning or something? What exactly are you thinking? I wasn't sure. The whole thing was starting to feel bigger than I was. It wasn't just the phone anymore, it was everything that had been happening since I'd moved in. The cold spots, the strange sounds, the unnerving feeling that the house was watching me. I don't know, I muttered, rubbing my temples. It's just, none of this makes sense. The phone's not connected to anything, Mike. It's literally impossible for it to ring, and yet it does. And it's not just ringing randomly, it's like it's trying to tell me something. Mike didn't say anything for a moment. He was staring at the phone with a thoughtful look, tapping his fingers on the desk. Then he spoke, almost as if to himself, what if it's not about the phone? What if the phone's just the messenger? What if it's the house? I felt a chill run through me. The thought hadn't crossed my mind, but it made sense. Something about this place felt wrong from the start. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of dread that never seemed to leave. The house, I repeated, trying to wrap my mind around it. You think the house is alive? I don't know, Mike said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. But if something's been calling you, maybe it's not just the phone. Maybe it's the place itself. You said this house was built a long time ago, right? Maybe it's tied to something you don't know about. I glanced over at the old phone again. It was just sitting there, so still, so deceptively normal. The dust on the shelf had settled once more, the strange marks now barely noticeable, but the fear gnawed at my insides. I can't keep ignoring it, I said, more to myself than to Mike. I need to know what's going on here. This can't just be coincidence. Mike gave me a hard look. If you're serious about this, I think you need to dig deeper. Find out who lived here before, who built this place, any stories, anything that might give you a clue. And maybe, just maybe, you should stop answering the phone. I can't just leave it alone, I said quietly. Whatever it is, it's not going to stop until I figure it out. I think the house wants me to know something. He let out a sigh. All right, but I'm not going down there with you again. You're on your own for that one. As Mike left that afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the phone again. The dread was thick in the air, and though it was still silent, I could almost feel the weight of it, like a presence just beyond my reach. That night, I went to the local library. I spent hours poring over town records and old newspapers. I couldn't find anything that immediately explained the strange occurrences, but I did find an article about a fire in the early 1900s that had destroyed part of the house. The fire had been blamed on faulty wiring, but the article mentioned something strange: several people had died, and there were rumors of something odd in the house's history, stories of whispers heard by previous owners, sounds that couldn't be explained. I felt a chill creep down my spine. Could it be possible that the house itself was tied to these events? Was there something about this place that made it alive? When I got home, I went straight to the basement. The phone was still there, exactly where I'd left it. I stared at it, feeling the pull again. Something was urging me to pick it up, to listen. But I didn't. I turned and walked away, slamming the basement door behind me. This time, I wasn't sure what was worse, the phone ringing or the fact that I didn't know why it was ringing. I had to get answers. I know that I'm running out of time. The thing outside is getting closer, and my heart is pounding louder in my chest with every passing second. The scratching has stopped, but I know it's not gone. It's waiting. Watching. The thing that's out there doesn't seem to care about the daylight. Last night, it was on my porch. Tonight, I don't know what to expect. I'm sure it's not just a regular animal, the things I've seen, the tracks, the way it moves, it's not natural. It's something else, something from beyond the known world, something from a place that shouldn't exist. I've thought about leaving. I've tried to leave. But the truck is ruined. I can't get out. And when I tried to escape on foot, the path seemed endless, the woods closing in around me, the trees twisting in strange shapes as if they were pulling me back. I couldn't make it. I tried calling the sheriff again today. No answer. My phone barely has any signal now, anyway. The only thing keeping me from completely losing my mind is the shotgun beside me. But I know deep down that no matter how many shells I have left, it won't be enough. I heard it again tonight. Not the scratching this time, but that low, guttural growl right outside the window. The last few hours have been so quiet that I almost convinced myself I was safe for once, but no. I saw its shadow move across the blinds. My blood ran cold. It was here. I've barricaded myself in, but I can feel the thing testing the doors and windows. The soft thuds of its claws scraping against the wood have become rhythmic, almost like it's taunting me. It knows I'm in here. It knows I can't escape. Every instinct tells me to run, but I know there's nowhere to go. So, I stay. Silent. Waiting. Watching the shadows. If you ever find yourself in a place like this, don't wait for help. It won't come. Don't make the same mistake I did. Get out while you still can. Run before you even hear the first noise. Trust me, it's too late for me. The door is starting to creak. It's getting closer. I don't know how much longer I have left. If you find this, know that I fought until the end. Know that whatever happens, I won't go quietly. Just, stay away from places like this. Don't make my mistake. I hear it now. Right outside the door. The click of its claws on the wood. It's coming. Please, help me. What lay beyond? The door looked old and weathered, its metal surface covered in patches of rust, but it was solid and unmoving. We all stared at it for a moment, the air thick with tension. Then Jake pushed the door open with a loud creak, the sound echoing like a warning. Beyond the door was a large, open room. The lantern room, I assumed, though it looked nothing like I imagined it would. The glass was shattered, leaving jagged edges along the frame. A faint blue light flickered from something in the corner, casting strange shadows on the walls. Jake stepped inside, followed by Maria. I hesitated, scanning the room. The floor was littered with old debris, but what caught my attention was the strange marking on the wall. It looked like symbols, carved deep into the stone, though it was hard to make them out in the dim light. I stepped closer, my heart racing. "Hey, look at this," I whispered, pointing to the markings. Jake and Maria turned, their flashlights sweeping across the walls, illuminating the symbols in stark contrast. "What the hell is that?" Maria muttered, moving closer to examine them. She ran her fingers over the carvings, her face paling. "Someone's been here recently," Jake said, his voice suddenly tense. "These markings are fresh." I felt a chill run down my spine. The blue light flickered again, and I instinctively stepped back. There was something wrong here, something ancient and forgotten that we weren't supposed to disturb. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the light from the stairwell. We were plunged into darkness, and I heard the unmistakable sound of breathing slow and labored coming from the far corner of the room. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice shaking now. No answer. I could feel the weight of whatever was in the room with us, lurking just beyond the reach of our flashlights. A shadow moved across the far wall, long and distorted, its shape unnatural. Maria let out a strangled gasp and stepped back, but she stumbled over something, her flashlight rolling away and leaving us in total darkness. "Maria!" Jake shouted, but his voice was muffled as though something was covering his mouth. I fumbled for my flashlight, finally managing to turn it on, only to find Maria standing still, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't moving. There was something in her expression, something that made my blood run cold. It was as if she had seen something so horrifying, so beyond reason, that her mind had shut down. I reached for her, but before I could touch her shoulder, the blue light flickered again, this time brighter, almost blinding. And then it vanished, leaving us in absolute silence. In that silence, I heard the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against stone. Something was moving, and it was getting closer. We weren't alone anymore. I pulled Maria toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The metal was locked from the outside, and no matter how hard I pushed, it wouldn't open. Panic surged in my chest, and I turned back to the room, my heart pounding in my ears. The shadow moved again, this time closer, and I could feel its presence looming behind us. I knew we had to get out. I had to protect my friends, but I didn't know how. My mind was racing, and all I could think was that the markings on the wall, the ones I thought were symbols, weren't symbols at all. They were warnings. Warnings we should have heeded. Telling myself it was the wind or my imagination, but then I heard it again, clearer this time, as if someone was standing right behind me. "Michael!" I froze. There was no one in sight. Just the rain, the dark, and the distant hum of traffic. The voice, my name, came from somewhere in the shadows between the streetlights. I felt a chill creep up my spine, not from the cold rain, but from something else, something deeper. I glanced around, trying to convince myself I was just hearing things, but then, for a split second, I saw a shadow move at the corner of my eye. It was fleeting, but unmistakable. Someone or something was there. I turned, heart pounding, scanning the empty street. "Michael," the voice whispered again, this time louder, closer. I swallowed hard, a knot forming in my stomach. I took a step backward, then another. But no matter how much I tried to back away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. The air felt thick, charged with an eerie weight, and the rain sounded muffled, like it was coming from miles away. I broke into a quick walk, my pace increasing as I neared the next intersection, trying to make it to the brighter part of the street. My mind raced. Who would be out here, whispering my name? I had no idea. The sound of footsteps behind me, slow at first, then growing quicker, echoed in the rain-drenched silence. I didn't dare turn around. It felt like whatever it was closing in, getting closer and closer with each step. The shadows between the streetlights seemed to stretch unnaturally long, twisting as though they were alive. "Michael!" The voice was right behind me now, so close I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, heart in my throat, expecting to see someone tangible, someone I could confront. But there was nothing. The street was empty. Silent. I was alone. And yet, I knew I wasn't. The sound of footsteps hadn't stopped. I could still hear them, pacing, almost in time with my own. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were cemented to the ground. The rain kept falling, cold and unrelenting, but the street seemed darker than before, as if the shadows were creeping in, drawing closer. Then, through the stillness, I heard something else, an almost imperceptible hum. It grew louder, slowly, almost as if it was coming from under the ground. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned sharply, looking around desperately for something, anything that could make sense of this. And that's when I saw it. There, just ahead of me, a figure stood under a flickering street light. The figure was blurry, indistinct, like it was made of fog or smoke. Its outline shimmered in and out of focus, and though it had no clear features, I could feel its eyes like it was watching me, waiting. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, still, like a sentinel in the dark, silently watching. "Michael," the voice came again, but this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a command, low and chilling, coming from the figure itself. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, my feet slipping on the wet pavement, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps followed, faster now, matching my pace perfectly. I could still hear that hum, faint but growing, as if something else was moving just beneath the surface of the world. The voice called again, but it wasn't my name anymore. It was something else, something foreign, something that didn't belong in this world. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the light at the end of the street. The moment I stepped into the bright circle of the street light, the footsteps stopped. The hum faded into nothingness. I stood there for a long time, catching my breath, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined it all. But when I looked back, the figure was gone. The street was empty again, as it had been before. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what was following me, or why it knew my name. All I know is that since then, the voices haven't stopped. They still call my name when the night falls. And sometimes, just before I drift off to sleep, I hear the sound of footsteps always just behind me, never quite close enough. In shallow gasps, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't look away, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn my head, to escape. The shadow stayed perfectly still, its presence almost suffocating. I reached for my phone, my hand trembling, but when I tried to turn the screen on, it flickered and went dark. I could hear my own breathing in the silence, the low hum of the air conditioning, but everything else was still. And then, it moved. The figure stretched toward the glass, its arm extending slowly, deliberately. It seemed to pulse, like a slow wave rolling through it. It reached the glass, its fingers brushing against the surface, and I felt a chill that was colder than the air in the room. My skin crawled. I wanted to scream, to shout, to run out of the apartment, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of something unseen, something that felt wrong. The shadow didn't speak, didn't make a sound. But I felt its eyes if it had eyes on me, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at it, but when I finally managed to look away, when I dared to glance at the real room, it was gone. But the fear, that cold, oppressive fear, didn't leave. It lingered, sitting heavily in my chest, even though I couldn't see the shadow anymore. The next morning, I covered the mirror with a blanket again. But as I placed it over the glass, I saw something new, a crack along the surface, just a tiny one, almost imperceptible. It hadn't been there the night before. The mirror, as if it had been waiting for something, had begun to break. The darkness I'd seen in the reflection had come a step closer. I don't know what I've gotten myself into. But I can't get rid of the mirror, no matter how hard I try. It's as if it's holding me here, forcing me to face whatever it wants to show me. And as much as I want to destroy it, something tells me that would make it worse. The shadow is still out there. Waiting. Watching. I don't know how much longer I can take this. But I'm telling you, if something happens to me, if I disappear, just remember that it started with that damn mirror. Ever. The air grows colder with each step, and I can almost hear the shadow's presence, a silent hum vibrating in my bones. My hands tremble, but I can't turn back now. I have to face it, have to know why it's been following me, why it's been tormenting me. I know what I'm about to do is a mistake, but I feel like if I don't do it, it will haunt me forever. I've reached the door. The faint smell of dust and old wood wafts through the cracks. The shadow is waiting, as I knew it would be. I can feel its eyes on me, even though it has no face. It's like the space itself is suffocating, like it's consuming everything around me. I feel it pulling at me, like gravity is bending in on itself, forcing me into the room. I know this will be the last thing I do. But I can't stop now. I have to know. Goodbye. And if you're still listening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. You never know what might be waiting in the shadows.